The phone's screams sliced through the quiet of my Chicago apartment, yanking me out of a shallow sleep. 2:47 a.m. The screen glowed with a name I hadn't seen in months. Nathan. My older brother never called, let alone in the dead of night. My stomach twisted as I swiped to answer, the cold glass pressing against my ear. Liv, it's Mom. Nathan's voice cracked, like he was choking on the words. She had a stroke, a bad one. They rushed her to Mass General, but the doctors don't think she's gonna make it. His sobs broke through, jagged and raw. She was asking for you, Olivia, before she went unconscious. She kept saying your name. The room spun. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. Is she still awake? I stammered, already stumbling out of bed, fumbling for the light switch. Did they say anything else? They're not sure, Nathan said, his voice thick with tears. But she wanted you, Liv. You need to come home. Now. I don't remember saying goodbye. My body moved on autopilot. I yanked a duffel bag from the closet, stuffing it with whatever clothes my shaking hands could grab. A sweater, jeans, a pair of mismatched socks. My laptop sat open on the desk, the half-finished draft of my latest investigation staring back at me. A piece on corporate fraud in the Midwest, the kind of story that could finally put my name on the map. A source had agreed to meet me tomorrow, a whistleblower with documents that could break the case wide open. It was my shot at a real byline, maybe even a journalism award. But none of that mattered now. I opened a booking site, my fingers trembling, so badly I mistyped my credit card number twice. Flights to Boston were scarce at this hour. The only option was a first-class ticket that cost nearly every penny I'd scraped together over the past year. I didn't hesitate. I clicked purchase, watching my savings vanish in a single transaction. Mom was worth it. She had to be. Eleanor Bennett, my mother, was the one person in our family who ever saw me. When I was 16, sneaking dog-eared, copies of The New Yorker under my bed because Dad said journalism was a waste of a mind. Mom would slip me her old notebooks from college, filled with scribbled stories she never published. She'd smile, her eyes soft, and whisper, "Keep writing, Liv. The world needs your voice." But Dad's shadow always loomed larger, his rules, his expectations, his empire. Bennett Properties, the family real estate business, was his god, and he wanted us all to worship it. Mom tried to shield me, but she could never stand up to him. Not really. I zipped the duffel bag, my mind racing. The last time I saw Mom was 8 months ago, at a tense Christmas dinner in Boston. She looked tired, her laugh quieter than I remembered, her hands fidgeting under Dad's watchful gaze. I'd been so caught up in my own life, chasing deadlines, building a name as a freelance investigative journalist, that I hadn't called her enough, hadn't visited. Now she was lying in a hospital bed, her voice fading, calling my name. What if I didn't make it in time? I grabbed my coat and headed for the door, pausing only to text my editor, Sarah. "Family emergency. Need to fly to Boston. I'll explain later." She'd be furious. The investigation was on a tight deadline, and I was the lead. Walking away now could cost me her trust, maybe even my career. But Mom's face flashed in my mind, her warm brown eyes, the way she'd hum old jazz tunes while cooking pancakes on Sundays. I couldn't stay. The cab to O'Hare was a blur, the city lights streaking past like tears on glass. I kept seeing Mom as she was when I was a kid, before Dad's ambition swallowed our family whole. She used to take me to the library, letting me pile books higher than I could carry. "Stories change the world," she'd say, ruffling my hair. But stories couldn't save her now. All I could do was get to her, hold her hand, and pray I wasn't too late. At the airport, I clutched my boarding pass, my chest tight with a fear I couldn't name. Something felt off, but I pushed it down. Nathan's voice echoed in my head. She was asking for you. I had to believe him. I had to believe Mom was still there, waiting for me. As the plane lifted off, I stared out at the dark sky, whispering a promise to her. I'm coming, Mom. Just hold on. The plane touched down at Logan Airport just as dawn broke, painting Boston's skyline in streaks of gray and gold. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, but adrenaline kept me moving. I powered on my phone, expecting a flood of messages from Nathan, updates on Mom, the hospital, anything. Nothing. Just one text. Chloe's at the gate. Hurry. Chloe, my younger cousin, the one who'd always been more loyal to Dad's wallet than to family. My gut twisted, but I shook it off. I was here for Mom, not for doubts. I spotted Chloe near baggage claim, her arms crossed, her face blank as a mannequin. No red eyes, no tissue clutched in her hand. She looked more annoyed than grieving. Liv, she said, barely meeting my gaze. You made it. Where's Mom? I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. How is she? Can we go to the hospital now? Chloe hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her purse. It's complicated. Let's get you home first. You need to rest after the flight. Rest? I stopped dead, my duffel bag thudding against my leg. Nathan said Mom was dying. I'm not going home to nap. Take me to Mass General. Now. She flinched, her eyes darting to the floor. Okay, fine. But don't freak out. Things are under control. Her words felt hollow, like a script she hadn't rehearsed enough. The drive to the hospital was silent, the hum of the car's engine filling the space where explanations should have been. Outside, Boston woke slowly. Delivery trucks, early joggers, the faint smell of salt from the harbor. Inside, my mind churned. Why was Chloe acting like this? Why hadn't Nathan called again? When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I was out of the car before Chloe could unbuckle. I marched into the ER lobby, the fluorescent lights harsh, against my tired eyes. The nurse at the front desk looked up, her face kind but guarded. I'm looking for a patient, I said, my voice trembling. Eleanor Bennett. She was brought in last night. Stroke. I'm her daughter, Olivia. The nurse's fingers tapped the keyboard, her brow furrowing. Can you repeat the name? Please? Eleanor Bennett, I said louder, as if volume could make it true. Around midnight, she's in critical condition. She typed again, then shook her head. I'm sorry, there's no record of an Eleanor Bennett in the past 48 hours. Not in the ER, not in ICU. Are you sure it was this hospital? My breath caught, like someone had punched me in the chest. Check again, I said, leaning over the counter. Maybe she was transferred. Neurology, maybe. Please. The nurse exchanged a glance with a colleague, who shook her head too. I'm certain, she said gently. No one by that name has been admitted. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I turned to Chloe, who stood a few feet away, staring at her shoes. Chloe, I said, my voice low, dangerous. Where is my mother? She shifted, her hands twisting together. Liv, calm down. It's probably a mix-up. Or maybe she's at a private clinic. Dad thought you should come home first. No, Stop. I cut her off, stepping closer. Don't lie to me. Nathan said Mom was dying. You picked me up to take me to her. Now you're telling me she's not here? Explain. Right now. Chloe's eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe fear. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. Okay, look. She didn't have a stroke. It was a scare. She's fine. Just not herself. We needed you here, Liv. The family needs you. The words hit like a slap. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the edge of the counter. You made me think my mother was dead, I said, my voice shaking with fury. I left everything, my work, my life, to come here. For a lie? Chloe wouldn't look at me. It wasn't my idea, she mumbled. Dad and Nathan thought, I don't care whose idea it was, I snapped. Take me home, now. The drive to my childhood home in Back Bay was a haze. My hands clenched in my lap, my nails digging into my palms. I'd walked away from a story that could have defined my career, burned through my savings, all because they played on my worst fear. Mom wasn't dying. She wasn't even in a hospital. But why? Why drag me across the country with a story this cruel? When we pulled up to the brownstone, its ivy-covered facade looked too perfect, like a postcard hiding a storm. Chloe parked, but I was already out, striding toward the door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lavender, Mom's favorite candle, the one she only lit for special occasions. The foyer gleamed, polished wood reflecting the chandelier's light. It felt staged, like a theater set. Dad stood at the base of the stairs, his suit pristine, his smile too wide. Olivia, he said, arms open as if I'd come for a reunion. You're home. Nathan appeared behind him, his face pale, eyes avoiding mine. The dining room door was cracked open, and I glimpsed a table set with Mom's best china, the kind reserved for Thanksgiving. A platter of blueberry scones, my favorite from childhood, sat in the center, their smell mocking me. Where's Mom? I asked, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Dad's smile didn't falter. She's resting. It's been a tough few days. Come, sit. We've got a lot to talk about. I didn't move. The lavender scent, the perfect table. Dad's calm, they weren't comforting. They were a trap, and I'd just walked right into it. The dining room felt like a stage, every detail too perfect to be real. The table was draped in a hand-embroidered cloth, the kind Mom only pulled out for holidays. Crystal glasses gleamed under the chandelier, catching slivers of light. In the center sat a tray of blueberry scones, their buttery smell tugging at memories of Saturday mornings when Mom would bake them just for me, humming Ella Fitzgerald while I scribbled in my notebook. But now, that warmth felt like a lie, just like everything else in this house. Dad gestured to a chair, his smile as polished as the silverware. Sit, Olivia. You must be exhausted. Nathan hovered near the doorway, his hands shoved in his pockets, still avoiding my eyes. Chloe slipped in behind me, her footsteps soft, like she hoped I wouldn't notice her. Where's Mom? I asked again, my voice cutting through the false coziness. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Not until I saw her. Dad's smile tightened, just for a second. She's upstairs, resting. The past few days have been overwhelming. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk as a family. Talk about what? I crossed, my arms, my pulse hammering. You lied to me. Nathan said Mom was dying. I left everything to come here, and now you're acting like it's just another Sunday brunch. Where is she? Nathan flinched, his eyes flicking to Dad. Chloe stared at the floor. Dad leaned back in his chair, folding his hands like a man about to close a deal. Olivia, you're upset, I understand. But there's a bigger picture here. Sit down, and I'll explain. I didn't move. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm. Finally, Dad sighed, his voice dropping to a tone I knew too well. The one he used when he wanted to control the room. Bennett Properties is in trouble, he said. We've hit a rough patch. A few bad investments, some legal disputes. Nothing we can't fix, but we need your help. My help? I frowned, the pieces not fitting. I'm a journalist. Dad, I don't know anything about real estate. What does this have to do with Mom? He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. It's about your grandmother's estate, Margaret's will. You turn 30 in a few weeks, and when you do, you'll inherit her trust. $10 million, Olivia. That money could save the company. Save us. The room went still. Nathan's shoulders tensed. Chloe's fingers froze on her glass. I felt a chill, like someone had opened a window in January. "You mean Nana's inheritance," I said slowly. "The one she left me with a condition, that I stay out of the family business." Dad's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. "A foolish condition. Margaret was old, sentimental. She didn't understand what it takes to keep a legacy alive. We're asking you to invest the money in Bennett Properties. As a partner. As family." "Invest?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You mean hand over $10 million to prop up a sinking ship? What's really going on, Dad? Why the lie about Mom? Why drag me here like this?" Nathan stepped forward, his voice low. "Liv, I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it this way. We thought if you believed Mom was sick, you'd come home. We just needed you here to talk." "Talk?" I turned on him, my voice rising. "You made me think she was dead, Nathan. I walked away from a story that could have changed my life. I spent every cent I had to get here. And for what? So you could guilt me into signing over Nana's money?" "Enough," Dad said, his tone hard now. "This isn't about guilt. It's about responsibility. Bennett Properties is your legacy, too. If the company fails, we all lose, your mother included." "Then where is she?" I shouted, my hands shaking. "If this is about family, why isn't Mom here? Why are you hiding her?" Dad stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You're not ready to see her yet. She's not well. But if you care about her, you'll listen. Sign the papers, Olivia. Help us fix this." I backed away, my heart pounding. The scones, the china, Dad's calm. It was all a performance, and I was the audience they needed to convince. I turned and walked out, ignoring Dad's call after me. My feet carried me upstairs, to my old bedroom, the one place in this house that still felt like mine. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing the same faded quilt, the same bookshelf stuffed with my high school journals. It smelled like dust and memories. I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. Nana's inheritance wasn't just money, it was her way of protecting me. She'd seen what Dad's ambition did to Mom, how it turned her into a shadow of the woman who once dreamed of writing novels. When I told Nana I wanted to be a journalist, she'd hugged me and said, "Chase your truth, Liv, don't let anyone cage it." Before she died, she told me about the trust. $10 million mine when I turned 30, as long as I stayed free of Bennett Properties. "They'll try to pull you in," she'd warned, her voice frail but fierce. "Don't let them." I opened the nightstand drawer, my fingers brushing against a small wooden box where I used to hide things from Dad. Inside was a folded letter, the paper yellowed, Nana's handwriting still bold. "My dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, it means you're facing the choice I always feared. Family isn't a chain, it's a choice. Choose your truth, no matter the cost. I believe in you. Love, Nana." Tears stung my eyes. She'd known. She'd seen this coming years ago. I tucked the letter into my pocket, my resolve hardening. Whatever Dad was hiding, it wasn't just about money. It was about control. And I wasn't going to let him win. A soft knock broke my thoughts. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face drawn. "Liv," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I messed up. I didn't know it would go this far. But there's more you don't know." "Like what?" I asked, my guard up. He hesitated, glancing down the hall like he was afraid of being heard. "It's about Mom. She's not just resting. I can't say more here. But please, don't sign anything. Not yet." His words hung in the air, heavy with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As he slipped away, I knew one thing for sure. Whatever they were hiding, it was bigger than I'd imagined. And I was going to find out what it was. Nathan's words clung to me like damp fog, heavy and impossible to shake. Don't sign anything. His warning echoed as I sat on my childhood bed, the letter from Nana still warm in my pocket. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that hides secrets. I couldn't stay still, couldn't wait for answers to find me. If Mom wasn't here, and she wasn't in a hospital, where was she? And why was Nathan so scared? I pulled out my phone and texted Lucas, an old colleague from my days at the Chicago Tribune. He was a bulldog of a reporter, the kind who could sniff out a lie from a mile away. We hadn't spoken in months, but if anyone could help me dig, it was him. Need your help. Family emergency in Boston. Can you run a quick check on Bennett Properties? Something's off. Urgent. I hit send, my heart racing. Then I slipped downstairs, moving like a thief in my own home. The dining room was empty now, the blueberry scones untouched, the china still gleaming. I crept into Dad's study, a room I'd always avoided. It smelled of leather and cigar smoke, the walls lined with framed photos of him shaking hands with city officials. His laptop sat on the mahogany desk, closed but unlocked. I knew his habits. He never logged out. My fingers hesitated over the lid. This wasn't just snooping, it was crossing a line. But they'd crossed one first. I opened the laptop, the screen glowing to life. Folders crowded the desktop, most labeled with project names. Harbor View Condos, South End Lofts. I clicked on one marked private. Inside was a spreadsheet, rows of numbers that made my stomach drop. Loans from unfamiliar names, interest rates as high as 20%, payments funneled to accounts in the Caymans. And then, buried in a subfolder, a scanned document with my name. Olivia Bennett, investment trustee. My signature was there, but it wasn't mine. A forgery, clean and deliberate. My breath hitched. They weren't just after Nana's money. They were setting me up to take the fall. I snapped photos of the screen with my phone, my hands shaking. Then I heard footsteps. I closed the laptop, ducked behind the desk, and held my breath. The door creaked open, and Chloe's voice whispered, "She's upstairs. You sure she won't find out?" A man's voice, low, unfamiliar, replied, "Not if you keep her distracted. The doctor's handling Eleanor." The doctor? My blood ran cold. I waited until their footsteps faded, then slipped back to my room, my mind spinning. Mom wasn't resting. She wasn't sick. She was being handled. I texted Lucas again. "Check property records for Bennett Family Holdings in Cape Cod. I think Mom's there. Hurry." By morning, Lucas came through. A text with an address. A beach house in Cape Cod, bought under a shell company tied to Bennett Properties. "Be careful, Liv," he added. "This smells like trouble." I didn't tell Nathan. He'd warned me, but I couldn't trust him yet. Instead, I called Lucas and asked him to meet me in Boston. "I'm driving to Cape Cod," I said. "If I'm not back by tonight, call the police." The drive was 2 hours, the road winding through salt marshes and dunes. The beach house was tucked behind a row of cedars, its windows dark, the ocean roaring beyond. I parked a quarter-mile away, my heart pounding like a drum. Lucas pulled up minutes later, his beat-up sedan looking out of place among the manicured estates. "You sure about this?" he asked, his eyes scanning the house. "No," I admitted. "But I have to know." We approached on foot, sticking to the shadows. The front door was locked, but a side window was cracked open, just enough to climb through. Inside, the air was stale, the furniture covered in dust sheets. A faint light flickered from the upstairs hall. I motioned for Lucas to stay quiet as we crept up the stairs, each creak of the floorboards like a gunshot in my ears. At the end of the hall, a door was ajar. I pushed it open and froze. Mom was there, sitting on a bed, her wrists bound loosely with a silk scarf. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy, like she was half asleep. A man in a white coat, a doctor I assumed, stood nearby, adjusting a syringe. "Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. Her head lifted, slow and heavy. "Liv?" she mumbled, her voice slurred. "You shouldn't be here." The doctor spun around, his face tightening. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping toward me. Lucas moved faster, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. "Don't move," Lucas growled. "Olivia, get your mom." I rushed to her, untying the scarf. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. "What did they do to you?" I asked, tears burning my eyes. "Sedatives," she whispered. "Your father. He said it was for my own good, to keep me safe until you signed." Her words were barely coherent, but they cut like a knife. Dad wasn't just lying about her death. He was holding her hostage, drugging her to manipulate me. I pulled out my phone, hitting record. "Mom, tell me everything. Who's doing this? What do they want?" She struggled to focus, her hand gripping mine. "Richard, Chloe. They need the money. The company's collapsing. They forged your name, loans, offshore accounts. They'll ruin you, Liv, if you don't sign. They said they'd declare you unfit. Take it all." The doctor squirmed, in Lucas's grip. "You don't understand," he said. "I was just following orders. Richard hired me to—" "Shut up," I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. I stopped the recording, my mind racing. This wasn't just fraud. It was kidnapping, coercion, a betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. I helped Mom to her feet, her weight heavy against me. "We're getting you out of here," I said. "Lucas, can you drive?" He nodded, dragging the doctor with us. We moved fast, piling into Lucas's car. Mom slumped in the back seat, her head against my shoulder. As we sped away, the ocean's roar faded, but my anger burned brighter. They'd taken everything, my trust, my career, my mother's freedom. But they weren't going to win. Back in Boston, I took Mom to a friend's apartment, a safe place Dad didn't know. Lucas stayed with the doctor, promising to keep him quiet until we figured out our next move. I sat with Mom, holding her hand, as she drifted in and out of sleep. The sedatives were wearing off, but her eyes were haunted. "I'm sorry, Liv," she whispered. "I should have fought harder, for you." "You're here now," I said, my throat tight. "That's enough." My phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "Where are you? Dad's freaking out. Don't do anything stupid." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent the recording to Lucas with a note. "Back this up. We're going to need it." Then I opened my laptop, pulling up the photos I'd taken in Dad's study. The forged signature, the shady loans, Mom's words. It was all coming together. But it wasn't enough. I needed more proof, something undeniable. I thought of Nana's letter, her warning to choose my truth. She'd known Dad's greed would consume us all. But she'd also given me the tools to fight back. Her trust, her belief in me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Mom, for Nana's legacy, for every lie they thought they could bury, and I was going to make sure they paid. The safe house was a small apartment in South Boston, its walls papered with faded florals and the faint smell of coffee lingering from the kitchen. Mom sat on a sagging couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders, her hands trembling as she sipped water. The sedatives were fading, but the shadows in her eyes remained. I sat beside her, my laptop open, the photos from Dad's study and the recording from Cape Cod burning a hole in my mind. We were safe for now, but safety wasn't enough. I needed justice. Lucas called that morning, his voice steady but urgent. "The doctor's talking," he said. He's willing to testify if we protect him. Says Richard hired him to keep Eleanor sedated until you signed the trust over. I've got him stashed at a motel. What's your next move?" I glanced at Mom, her face pale but resolute. "We go to the law," I said. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about what they did to her, to everyone." I reached out to Clara Hayes, Nana's estate lawyer, a woman whose sharp wit and sharper legal mind had terrified Dad when Nana's will was read. Clara agreed to meet us that afternoon at her office in Cambridge, a narrow brick building tucked between bookstores. She listened as I laid out everything: the forged signature, the offshore accounts, the loans with predatory terms, and the recording of Mom's confession in Cape Cod. Her eyes narrowed when I played the audio, Mom's slurred voice detailing Dad's plan to declare me unfit and seize Nana's trust. "This is more than fraud," Clara said, her pen tapping the desk. "It's coercion, kidnapping, and document forgery. We can file a civil suit to protect the trust and a criminal complaint to bring them down. But Olivia, this will tear your family apart. Are you ready for that?" I thought of Mom, bound and drugged in that beach house, of Nana's letter, urging me to choose my truth, of the investors, people like the retirees I'd interviewed for, stories, whose lives Bennett Properties had ruined with empty promises. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. "Let's do this." Clara moved fast. She drafted a petition to freeze Bennett Properties' assets and filed a criminal complaint with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. I handed over the recording, the photos, and a USB drive with every document I'd pulled from Dad's laptop. Lucas delivered the doctor's signed statement, corroborating Mom's account. By the next day, the FBI was involved, their investigation spreading like wildfire. They raided Bennett Properties' downtown office, carting away computers and file boxes while reporters swarmed outside. The trial began 3 months later at the federal courthouse in Boston, a gray stone building that loomed over the harbor. I sat in the back row, Mom beside me, her hand cold in mine. She hadn't spoken much since Cape Cod, her guilt and shame, a wall between us. I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, but the words stuck in my throat. Across the courtroom, Dad sat at the defendant's table, his suit crisp, his face unreadable. Chloe was next to him, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous twitch. Their lawyer, a slick man named Victor Klein, had been with the family for years. I'd seen him at holiday parties, laughing over brandy. Now he was fighting to save them from prison. The prosecutor, a woman with steel gray hair and a voice like a gavel, laid out the charges: wire fraud, money laundering, forgery, and felony coercion. She presented the evidence with surgical precision: the forged trust document with my signature, emails between Dad and Klein discussing how to neutralize my claim to the inheritance, financial records showing millions funneled to Shell, companies in the Caribbean, and then the recording from Cape Cod, Mom's voice echoing through the courtroom. "They'll ruin you, Liv, if you don't sign." Dad didn't flinch, his eyes fixed on the judge. Chloe's hands shook, her gaze darting to the gallery where reporters scribbled furiously. Klein tried to spin it, claiming the loans were legitimate, the sedation was medical care for Mom's fragile state. But the doctor's testimony shattered that lie. Under oath, he admitted to administering sedatives at Dad's direction, producing text messages as proof. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words suffocating. Nathan was the surprise. He'd turned himself in a week after Cape Cod, offering a full statement in exchange for immunity. He took the stand, his voice breaking as he described Dad's plan to fake Mom's death and pressure me. "I didn't want to hurt Liv," he said, looking at me for the first time in months. But I was too weak to stop it. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was pity. The trial lasted 4 weeks. On the final day, the courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. The judge's voice was calm but unyielding as she delivered the verdict. Richard Bennett, my father, was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for orchestrating the fraud and coercion, with a $6 million fine. Chloe, complicit in the forgery and money laundering, got 10 years. Victor Klein lost his law license and faced 5 years for aiding the scheme. Nathan walked free, but the family he'd tried to protect was gone. I didn't feel victorious. Relief washed over me, cold and heavy, like rain after a fire. Mom's grip on my hand tightened, but she didn't speak. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions, their cameras flashing. I ignored them, guiding Mom to a waiting car. As we drove away, I caught her reflection in the window, fragile, but alive. We hadn't talked about what came next, about the years of silence when she let Dad's control smother us both. That conversation would come, but not today. Back at the safe house, I sat alone, staring at the USB drive that held our evidence. The trial was over, but the scars remained. I thought of Nana, her letter a quiet strength in my pocket. She'd known this day might come, had armed me with the tools to fight. But winning didn't erase the loss of a father I once admired, a brother I'd trusted, a mother I was still learning to forgive. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of it settle. Justice was done. Now, I had to figure out what came after. The Tiu trial left a quiet behind. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that echoes with what's been lost. Mom and I moved into a small rental in Cambridge, a place with creaky floors and windows that let in too much light. It was nothing like the polished brownstone of my childhood, but it felt honest. We didn't talk much those first weeks. She'd sit by the window, staring at the street, her hands folded like she was holding herself together. I'd work at the kitchen table, my laptop open, trying to piece my career back together. But the silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of things neither of us knew how to say. I couldn't go back to Chicago, not yet. The story I'd abandoned was picked up by another reporter, and my editor's trust was a bridge I'd have to rebuild. But Nana's inheritance was still mine, untouched by Dad's schemes, thanks to Clara's legal maneuvering. $10 million, a weight I hadn't expected to carry. I kept thinking of her letter, her words like a compass. Choose your truth. I knew what I had to do. I started the Bennett Community Fund, a nonprofit to help the victims of Bennett Properties fraud. Retirees who'd lost pensions, small contractors stiffed on payments, families who'd believed in Dad's glossy promises. The old headquarters, a glass tower in downtown Boston, was the first thing to go. I sold it, using the proceeds to buy a vacant warehouse in Roxbury. By spring, it was transformed. A community center with classrooms for job training, a daycare for single moms, and a legal aid office for fraud victims. I stripped away every trace of Dad's legacy. No plaques, no photos of him grinning with mayors. Just a simple sign out front. Bennett Community Fund, Rebuilding Trust. Nathan showed up one day, unannounced, his hands stuffed in his pockets, like he was still that awkward kid who'd sneak me comic books. I want to help, he said, his voice low. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but let me try. I didn't trust him, not fully, but I saw something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or a need to make things right. I gave him a job, managing outreach, small tasks to prove himself. We didn't talk about the past, but working side by side, I felt the first cracks in the wall between us. The hardest part was Mom. She started therapy, unraveling years of living under Dad's control. One evening, as I sorted fund applications, she slid an envelope across the table. Her handwriting was shaky, the paper plain. Olivia, it read. I failed you. I let Richard's world swallow mine, and I didn't protect you when it mattered most. I kept this because it reminded me of the girl you were, the one I should have fought for. Inside was a yellowed page from my high school journal, a story I'd written about a whistleblower exposing corruption. She'd kept it all these years. I looked at her, my throat tight. Why didn't you tell me you kept it? I asked. She shrugged, her eyes wet. At first, I was angry you didn't want the life we planned. Then I was ashamed. By the time I realized how wrong I was, it was too late. Or I thought it was. I didn't know what to say. The anger I'd carried for years wasn't gone, but it was softer now, like a bruise fading. It's not too late, I said finally. Not if we try. She nodded, a small smile breaking through. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. I threw myself into the fund, but I also started writing again. Not the investigative pieces I used to chase, but essays about trust, betrayal, and what it means to rebuild when your family is the one who burned the house down. I sent one to The Atlantic, half expecting rejection. 2 weeks later, they called, wanting to publish it. Then the Boston Globe reached out, asking for a series on fraud victims. My words were finding a home, and with them, I was finding myself. 1. Afternoon, I spoke at a community event in the new center, standing in a room filled with people whose lives Dad had upended. I told them about Nana, about the trust she'd left to keep me free. This fund isn't just money, I said, my voice steady. It's a promise to do better, to build something honest from the ruins. The applause was warm, not for me, but for the idea that healing was possible. Nathan caught me afterward, holding a stack of flyers. "You're good at this," he said, almost shy. "Better than Dad ever was." I smiled, but it was bittersweet. I'm not doing it to be better than him. I'm doing it because it's right. That night, I sat at my laptop, drafting a new essay. The cursor blinked, and I thought of Mom's letter, Nathan's tentative steps, the faces at the center. The family I'd lost wasn't the one I was building now. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The air in the York Correctional Facility's visitation room was cool, almost sterile, with soft yellow light spilling from ceiling fixtures. I sat at a plastic table, my hands clasped, waiting. Mom had been transferred here 6 months ago, serving an 18-month sentence for her role in hiding Dad's illicit funds. I'd avoided this visit for weeks, unsure if I was ready to face her. But the journal page she'd sent, the one I'd written as a teenager, sat in my bag, a quiet nudge that maybe it was time. She walked in, her light blue uniform loose on her frame, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was still hers, but harder, etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. She paused when she saw me, then sat across the table, her hands folded like they were anchoring her. "Olivia?" she said, her voice soft, almost afraid it would break the air between us. "I got your letter," I said, sliding the journal page toward her. "The story I wrote. You kept it all this time." Her eyes flickered, a spark of something warm. "I almost threw it out," she admitted. "When you chose journalism over the family business, I was furious. But then, I kept it because it was you. The real you. I should have told you that sooner." I nodded, my chest tight. "Why didn't you stand up to Dad? When he planned to forge my signature, to drug you, to use me? Why didn't you say something?" She looked down, her fingers twisting together. "I was scared. Richard had a way of making you feel like defying him would cost everything. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could protect you in my own way. But I was wrong. I see that now." Her words landed heavy, not erasing the hurt, but softening its edges. "I don't know if we'll ever be what we were," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I think we can start somewhere new, if you're willing to try." She nodded, her eyes wet. "That's all I want, Liv." Driving back to Cambridge, I felt lighter, like I'd set down a weight I'd carried too long. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a door cracked open, letting in a sliver of possibility. A week later, I traveled to Maine, to the small coastal house where Nana had spent her final years. The Bennett Community Fund had turned it into a shelter for women recovering from financial abuse, its white clapboard walls now bright with fresh paint. I stood in the yard, the sea breeze sharp against my skin, and lit a candle by the garden where Nana used to grow lavender. I could almost hear, her voice fierce and warm, "My girl, you found your way." I smiled, the flame steady in the wind. She'd given me more than money. She'd given me courage. In New York that fall, I spoke at a journalism conference, standing before a room of strangers who wanted to hear my story. I didn't talk about fraud statistics or legal clauses. I started with the call at 2:47 a.m., the lie that broke my family, and the truth that set me free. "Sometimes," I said, "you have to choose between the family you're born into and the one you build with honesty and respect." I chose the latter, and it cost me everything I thought I needed. But it gave me something better. Myself. Afterward, a woman approached me, her handshake firm. She ran a nonprofit for victims of familial fraud. "Your story isn't just yours," she said. "It's theirs too. The people too afraid to speak. Keep telling it." I did. My essays found homes in journals and magazines, each one a step toward understanding what family really means. Nathan became a steady presence at the fund, his quiet dedication a kind of apology. Mom wrote me letters from prison, small stories about her therapy, her hopes for when she'd be free. I read them, saving each one, not sure what our future would hold, but open to finding out. One evening, I opened an email from a teenage girl in Ohio. "I read your essay in the Globe," she wrote. "My dad tried to make me sign over my college fund for his business. I said no because you did. Thank you." I sat back, tears blurring the screen. This was why I kept going. Not for applause, but for moments like this, when my truth became someone else's strength. I looked out at the Cambridge skyline, the city lights soft against the dusk. The family I'd lost wasn't the one I'd found. It was imperfect, patched together with effort and time. But it was mine. And if I had to stand alone to build it, I would. Proudly. Without regret. What would you do if your family betrayed you? Share your thoughts below.